Well, thank you very much indeed. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Rick. I'm going to speak for about 20 minutes, not more than that, and then afterwards there may be a chance for a few questions. I'm sure what I have to say will provoke and annoy and frustrate, no doubt. But I want to start with a picture of a world you will all recognise. It's a world in which communities are no longer as isolated as they've been for centuries, in which trade is truly global, and in which cross-cultural transactions are the norm. And why is this? Because an unprecedented IT revolution has sponsored astounding advances in popular literacy and in international education, as we've just heard. And you recognise that society, of course, because it's one you know intimately well, right? Well, no, actually. I'm talking about the 1490s. That decade in which, as every school kid knows, Columbus discovered America. 500 years later, we are probably at the dawn of another renaissance. And today our planet is going through a transformation every bit as revolutionary as the one that ended feudalism, liberated the common man, launched the Reformation, and unleashed European nationalism. But this is no historical abstraction. It's our life story. Incredibly, it's your experience, my career, all our working weeks. When I was a teenager, dreaming of life and literature, the engine of my self-expression was my sky blue Olympia portable, and I grew up in that lost world of carbon paper, hot metal, and galley proofs, in which a printer who minded his P's and Q's could compose a line of type upside down and backwards in seconds, as quick as Caxton. And so where am I now? Where are we now? These are the best of times and the worst of times. Very, very confusing times. Most of us in this room have been living through the biggest paradigm shift, that's a technical term, since Caxton set up shop in Westminster some 500 years ago. And it's not over yet, nowhere near. And the process of IT change sponsors all kinds of apocalyptic visions, all kinds of programs we've just seen. And every week brings more news, confusing news from the digital front line. In America, it's said that screens are so ubiquitous that handwriting is dead. From New York, we have reports of a new kind of agenting to develop digital property with technology startups. Something called breakout books is highlighting self-published titles with online ratings and high traffic. And quite recently, the writer Neil Gaiman gave a talk in which he said, "My only real prediction for writing and publishing is that it's all changing." Thank you, Neil. Well, Stephen King used to be a reliable bellwether. King once made headlines by publishing his work online. Now he says he prefers to publish his latest, Joyland, only in paper, for sale in bookshops, a quixotic gesture on behalf of the American book trade. In Britain, book selling is also said to be on the rocks. Victoria Barnsley of HarperCollins said it would not be insane to charge for browsing in bookshops. When I saw her last week at the Not the Orange Prize, she told me this was supposed to be a joke. Well, one thing is certain. It's a golden age of reading. And before you protest, just think about this. In all media, from iPhones and iPads to Kindles and Nooks, to enhanced hardbacks to collector's editions, the consumption of print is at an all-time high. In February this year, the Pew Research Centre reported that people under 30 are now reading more books than they were 10 years ago, and in more formats. And since the millennium, English worldwide has moved into a new phase, powered by global capitalism and the internet. A world without borders, largely decoupled from its colonial past. Never before has there been such a hunger for a common tongue, one whose reach and range is unparalleled. In China, they call it crazy English. Never mind the labels, this fact is awesome. It's an awesome fact. For the first time in human history, it's possible for one language to be transmitted and simultaneously received and understood across the entire planet. Such news can drive people a little crazy. In New York, the new head of Hachette Publishing, Michael Peach, says, "It's a golden age of everything." I'm a bit like the woman in When Harry Met Sally. I'll have what he's having. This transformation is relentless, profound, and sometimes invisible. But as all of you who participate in Scribble know, it's not the less real for that. the internet has transformed the nature of information. It has made privacy obsolete and put an astonishing new power in the hands of corporations and governments, from Amazon to GCHQ. The news of PRISM, which broke last week, the secret US government data surveillance operation, is quite shocking, but hardly surprising. Information was always power. Now it's a weapon of war. More than that, the internet has changed the nature of capitalism itself. Money now moves so fast across the world that national borders are virtually meaningless. In the euro crisis, global speculators laid siege to the economies of Spain and Greece and even threatened France. And whatever is the meaning of American independence when China owns 2/3 as much of the US national debt as the Federal Reserve? Information, money, and finally people are becoming liberated as never before, just as they were at the beginning of the 16th century. I think we're living through one of those waves of creative destruction by which capitalism renews itself from time to time. What's happening is both creative and destructive, and what we have to do here together is figure out what's positive and what's negative. Moore's law says that computing power doubles every 2 years, and McCrum's law says that electronic time moves faster than real time. These laws, equally destructive and creative, have reshaped the world of information in ways we've all benefited from. The internet turned 40 this year, the World Wide Web is 22, and the personal computer is in its mid-30s. And in the background, time ticks on remorselessly. There's now a generation of readers for whom the screen is as familiar as the page. Never mind that the screen simply mimics the page. The point is, these are millions not just of new readers, but of a new kind of reader. When Ronald Reagan took office in 1980, the USA was 83% white. During President Obama's re-election year 2012, for the first time in America, the census revealed that more than half of all American children belong to minority groups. Now you're saying to yourself, what on earth does all this have to do with the impact of the digital revolution on literature? And how does it connect to the digital divide? But here's my answer. We are, I think, uniquely privileged. The big difference, though, between 500 years ago and now is this. It's epistemological. In the 1490s, people, even among the elite, knew very little. Information was hard to come by. Global consciousness was primitive and undernourished. We, by contrast, can access information about absolutely everything. And yet, that facility remains strangely disabling. We have the knowledge, but we can't seem to engage with it in a productive, decisive, or meaningful way. As George Orwell, writing in my newspaper, The Observer, so memorably put it, to see what's in front of one's nose needs a constant struggle. And I believe that we have an obligation as journalists, editors, writers, arts administrators, librarians, booksellers, to focus with laser intensity on this utterly new and strangely disconcerting situation. There's going to be a reconfiguration of the publishing food chain from top to bottom, bringing writer and reader much closer together and changing the terms of trade. But beyond that, it's as if the roadmap we used to navigate by has been torn up and scattered to the four winds. And looking down the road ahead, no one, in the famous Hollywood mantra, no one knows anything. Anyone who tells you they know the shape of our business in, say, 2050 is deluding themselves. Today, after 20 years of dislocating change, the best we can say is that this is not the end, or the beginning of the end, but just possibly the end of the beginning. And just as our situation, if you like, our predicament, is new, so it calls for a new approach, and we must think anew to act anew. I want to slightly recast the debate about the future. Some commentators like to frame it as a battle between old and new, between ink and chips, so to speak. People will ask, and this conference will ask, what has digital done to literary values? Who are the gatekeepers in the age of free, and so on? Now, I think these are the wrong questions. Most writers that I know, and I'm sure this includes many of you here today, are interested in both technologies, old and new, and most readers too. We are voracious consumers of print with an inbuilt shit detector. Let's face it, most readers are elitist. We all want the best of all possible worlds, and why not? The content is what really matters, or to put that another way, the story. Digital platforms are empty and meaningless without content. So it's not about pixels versus print. It's not about how or where you're reading, it's about what you're reading. In the words of the New York Times in a recent editorial, it will be good if this moment, 2013, provokes a reckoning about what really needs to be preserved in the culture. As I say, this is only the end of the beginning. This e-boom awaits its Shakespeare, its Cervantes, its Dickens. All three writers, giants of their time, cheerfully experimented with format. Dickens with serial fiction, Pickwick Papers, David Copperfield and so on, Shakespeare's estate with a crowd-sourced volume, the collected works, and Cervantes with any number of genres, plays, poetry, folk tales, Don Quixote, the first European novel and so on. So maybe the app, an experimental online novel, will pioneer new ways to present a story. In such a situation, we can be hedgehogs or foxes. The fox knows many things. The hedgehog famously knows one big thing. And today I'm opting to be the hedgehog. You naturally can all be foxes. The one big thing that I know for sure, and which we are sometimes in danger of forgetting, is that writing is neither free nor easy. The gospel of free comes from California, the home of the Beach Boys, the surfboard, and the frisbee. But free, in the history of print, is an anomaly. For at least 300 years, the world of books fought hard to place copyright at the heart of its business. And despite the IT revolution I've described, copyright remains the bone marrow of what we do. Our predecessors understood that all writing must come at a cost, not just financial. Annie Dillard, the American poet, has a powerful passage in her book, The Writing Life. It goes as follows: the page, that eternal blankness, affirming your daring as a necessity, the page which you cover with the crabbed thread of your gut, the page of your death, against which you pit all your life's strength. That page will teach you how to write and what it costs. More literally in the past, going back many centuries, the old business of putting black on white has been deadly dangerous and fraught with terrible risk. Consider, if you will, the case of the London printer John Twine. I'm prepared to bet no one in this room has heard of John Twine. In February 1663, Twine dared to publish a seditious pamphlet which justified the right of rebellion against the king. The pamphlet was anonymous. No one believed that Twine had written it, only that he had transformed it from manuscript to print. But that was enough for the authorities. And Twine was sentenced to the most terrible fate ever meted out to a man of letters. He was to be hanged, drawn and quartered. That is, in plain English, dragged through the streets to Tyburn, the place we know as Marble Arch, hanged by the neck, cut down while still alive, castrated, disemboweled, finally beheaded, then cut into pieces like a carcass in an abattoir. The night before, Twine's friends and family begged him to confess the source of the treason and get off. But instead, John Twine set new standards for English stoicism. From his condemned cell, he told his reporters that it was, I quote, not his principle to betray the author. The next day, after the inevitable butchery, Twine's head was duly placed on a Ludgate Hill spike. And this is simply the most horrific example of the cost of the free word, the thing we should never forget, from a grim catalogue of burnings, beheadings, beatings, and butchery. No one who takes the most casual look at our literary inheritance can escape the conclusion that the printed word has been inked in blood and etched in pain. So, black on white is not for sissies. Yes, we are uniquely privileged to have this new technology. It gives us incredible freedoms. but it also bestows a special responsibility not to waste or squander it. And if the business of putting black on white is no longer a matter of life and death, I want to put to you that it is still a business in which much is at stake, in whatever format we choose. Good content, good quality, more than ever in an overcrowded market, is what matters most. Originality is the toughest kind of content. Ezra Pound had a simple formula. Make it new, he said, which is easier said than done. Content is one thing. Content that matters is even more of a challenge. It does not come from insiders, festival hounds, metropolitan literati, or cosy creative writing schools. It comes from outsiders, from independents, mavericks, oddballs, and contrarians. It comes from rage, exclusion, necessity, and insecurity. Looking backwards, the writer has always been a bit marginal. The garret has been replaced by Starbucks and Tyburn by the Twitter sphere. But we still have to be more vigilant than ever. It's not about pixels versus print, it's about the words on the page. Every publisher knows how hungry its audience is for high content. That's an instinctive response. Content, language, call it what you will, is the thing that expresses our humanity, that separates us from beasts. It is only through words that we can learn to express our true selves in love and literature, in life and learning. Only through language can we reimagine and remake our society. So English becomes an engine of renewal. And all of us here are lucky enough to be English readers and English booksellers, agents, editors, writers, and publishers. And readers, of course. Through the inspiration of the English and the Irish tradition, from Milton and Dickens, from Donne to Swift to Ted Hughes, from Austen to Joyce, we all know, as arbitrators of the higher standards, that English prose today has a AAA rating as a vehicle for aspiration, artistic achievement, and ambition. That's what I want to celebrate here today. Language and ideas in the community at play in the fields of our imagination. Now, in The Tempest, Shakespeare's Caliban rails at Prospero. You taught me language, he says, and my profit on it is I know how to curse. But we're not cursing, we're celebrating. Across the known world, we're expressing ourselves in an extraordinary variety of literary media, in audio and ebooks, in magazines and in blogs, in every conceivable font, words, words, and more words. So yes, the chances are that this is a beginning, not an end. And there are, after all, grounds for optimism. Technological change is not discontinuous. The typewriter did not eliminate the pencil or the fountain pen, nor the motor car, the horse. The book survives in yet more formats, but always recognizably as a book. So I'm optimistic. I speculate that no amount of structural change, professional streamlining, or electronic wizardry will alter the writer's essential task, which is this: to sit alone, day after day, and let his or her imagination take him or her to the limit, and put words down, one after the other, on the page. He or she can share something with the publisher, which is to take risks, to inspire and to seduce readers, to disrupt the still waters of convention, to make mischief, to dream impossible dreams, black on white. One thing is certain: when we worry about the essential questions of quality and practice in the digital age, how to do better, at least we would now know where to make a start. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert. Okay, so we're now going to have a Q&A session, and what I do need is a handheld mic. Am I best going for this one here, Joel, or yeah, someone can run down with one. And Vic, or if anyone's around that can be of assistance with running backwards and forwards with the mic, that would be great. I'm not sure where Vic's reemerged, great. Okay, I think I'd like to kick off asking a question. I'm really intrigued by all of that, and I'm very inspired to go and do a writing workshop right now after hearing you speak. But I'll have to wait till tomorrow, but today is all about discussions rather than writing. But what I would ask is, the very simple debate as to whether or not we're going to lose paper books. Is it something that you ever envisage, or are they always going to be there?
Well, I think, as I said, change is not discontinuous, and I think that, I mean, to go back to, as I began in the 1490s, Caxton set up his shop in 1476, and died in the early 16th century, 15-something, I forget when. But the monks were still writing manuscript books until well into the 1570s and 80s. In other words, they carried on. And I think that, I mean, I have kids who have books and screens, and as I said, there's a generation which now knows only the screen. But the book is a very seductive beast. And I think that, as I say, we can have both. We don't have to say either or. I wrote this on my pad at home with a pencil. I transferred it to a screen. Very nice to have it printed out. Thank you very much. Digital, but it was written initially on a pad with a pencil. And yet here we are, and I'm sure I could have had a PowerPoint presentation to back it up. The fact is, it's words on the page, and I think that these things are going in parallel, side by side.
It's good to hear. I'm glad. I like the books. Okay, who would like to ask a question? So either Robert or Alison, or even myself. Any takers? Yes, we have one here, but right in the centre. Please do make the most of this opportunity to have. We have Robert here, so please do make the most of it. We've only got a few more minutes.
You're saying that we're living through the biggest revolution since the 16th century, or 1492.
Well, I always think quite worried about being administered, about the Industrial Revolution. So, but I mean, yes, I think in IT terms, yeah.
And then you went on to talk about the almost relevance of national boundaries, because capital is able to move beyond national boundaries. And then you said about that it liberated people, and I'm interested in having that point elucidated, please.
Well, I think if you look at the Arab Spring, good example, the liberation of people, for better or worse. When I say liberate, set them free to express themselves in new ways. I think the Arab Spring would be an answer for that. For example, it didn't necessarily have a good outcome for everybody by any means, but it did cause the reconfiguration of some pretty grim regimes.
So do you think that's universally applicable? Do you think that will apply to China as well?
I think there will always be, China's a very interesting case. And I've been to China and I've seen people learning English in football stadiums. It's an amazing sight, 10,000 people chanting English phrases, with a man with a microphone in the middle. It's very odd, but it's interesting. But so obviously there are local cultures which have their own rules and determinants. But I think, broadly speaking, the world is becoming a smaller place and more integrated through this technology.
Please raise your hand if you have any questions. We've got several. Yeah, go see Neil and we'll come down to the front at the end.
Robert, thank you very much. That was a really interesting talk. My question really is primarily as a reader rather than writing. You said essentially the process of writing quality will continue to be as difficult as it always has been.
Sure, that's true.
Yet, I think what you're saying is that, in a sense, the process of publishing has become a lot easier. The sort of intermediary between the reader and the writer. Yet, as a reader, how in the future do you think we're going to know where to go with the quality writing? How is that process going to work?
I think in the way we always have, by word of mouth. Okay, how many, can I ask you to put up your hands? This is going to be a very tough question. How many in this room have read or looked at 50 Shades of Grey? Go on.
Oh, I'm impressed, actually. Yeah, no one's been honest, have they?
Who in this room doesn't know what I'm talking about? Okay, so that was originally published in Australia, self-published, but in the most obscure possible way. But somehow, I mean, I'm not saying it's a good example, but it's an example of something. People find their way to what they want to find, and I think that this is actually a good time for self-publishing. And there are many opportunities. It's curious how things do float to the top. But I mean, just to follow the thought through, clearly the power of the old gatekeepers, the publishers, is diminished.
This question sort of follows that. You said that writing was neither easy nor free. So much is available for free, from the tweets that we're all tweeting as we sit here and all of that. How do we get people to hunger to pay for writing?
It's a very interesting question. I think that is the question of our time. I also think, I mentioned talking about copyright, and I had to cut it down a little bit to fit in time, but I think that this period that we're living through, roughly from the millennium to the present, is a kind of anomalous period. I think this, when everything is free, is absolutely anomalous. I think we have to find ways in which to reward the creative community. I mean, for example, my newspaper, the Observer and Guardian, you can get, I can write for it, and it'll cost you £2.50 on a Sunday, but why would you buy it? It's free. And it doesn't cause me a problem, but it does cause my bosses a problem, because they're losing a lot of money. Manchester Guardian, the Guardian has embraced the gospel of free. And
you mean free online, just to be clear?
It's free online, yes. It's not free. No,
it's not free if you go down a paper shop.
No. But that's a real problem. And until we find a way of monetizing the transaction of the writer on the screen, and in fact, I was just looking at my email before I came in here, Philip Pullman just asked that library readings of e-books should be rewarded. So that I think gradually people will find ways of monetizing transaction, but it is the question at the moment.
We've only got a couple of minutes, let's quickly move on. We've got 2 more questions, and then if there's time for Zala, we'll take
one over there. Okay, we'll start with you.
From the point of view as a writer, do you think a lot of young people who might be potential novelists might turn to blogging because there's something, writing a novel's a long, long road, whereas with blogging there's much more kind of immediate feedback?
I think people will very well start with blogging, and then they'll want something more demanding. I think, as I say, we're all elitists about this. We all want to do better. We want to set ourselves greater challenges. And I think that someone who began as a blogger might well end up writing fiction. I didn't see why not. And I think people do like a challenge. I mean, I think whether as readers we want books to raise our game, and I think the same is true of writing. So I'm not too depressed by that prospect, personally. As you can see, I'm an optimist.
Sorry,
would you like to please tell us who is impressed you and when you started writing?
So who impressed you?
Well, I always used to my answer to this always used to be V.S. Naipaul. But his last book's been so crazy, I sort of rather lost faith with it. But I think he's truly, I think V.S. Naipaul was a great writer. I think Harold Pinter is a great, I think Milan Kundera, who I published once, is a great, but I think Naipaul is somebody who addresses, that can be a controversial thing to say in some parts of the world, but I think he's a great writer in English. For me.
If it's true to say that the book was the vehicle for the written word, if you like, are we moving towards now a vehicle that's faster and more powerful with assisted steering, and if so, whose hands is on the wheel?
Well, that's another interesting question. I mean, who guards the guards? Yes, it's a very interesting question. And clearly, as I said, no one knows what the future. It would be mad to say what will we all be doing in 2050. If we were all to regather here in 2050, what would we be talking about? If you think back just 10 years to the millennium, or 13 years, and look at the mobile phone from 2000, look at the mobile phone now and see what differences. The speed of change is absolutely fantastic. I was talking to Claire, the video artist, before we came in here. They can now shoot video, it's perfectly broadcastable on an iPhone. In the good old days, the Thames crew used to go around with a minivan with 10 people in them.
That little thing up there is getting us now live on the internet.
So who knows? But the interesting thing is that when you open up a Kindle or a Nook, what do you get? You get a page. The page is still the thing. And until that, there was a shift from the codex to the page in the Dark Ages. So who knows what? I've literally no idea. I can't possibly answer that. But I think that the point is, I think there is a tremendous appetite for print and the written word, and I think that is the thing which I keep faith with.
Fantastic. I'm afraid I'm going to have to wrap up questions, but please give Robert another round of applause.
Thank you.